Dan Bayer from Next Best Picture, and we are talking with Jack Huston, the writer and director of The Day of the Fight. Jack, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dan. Lovely to meet you.
Oh, it's lovely to meet you as well. Very excited to talk to you about this film, which I was lucky enough to see at the New York premiere this past week. I'm curious, what was the spark that led you to not just write this film, but to direct it as well?
Well, I always say I've always wanted to direct, but I was in no rush to direct. The idea had to be right, the timing had to be right. There is that sort of old saying, which sounds kind of corny, lightning had to strike, but it's funny, when it does happen, it really does happen. When this idea came about and I decided to pitch it to the person who would be the least interested in an idea of a movie pitch, which was my wife, who who doesn't really stay awake for more than a few minutes usually in any film, whether I'm in it or not, or behind the camera, whatever. But I did pitch this idea, and I did say it's Michael Pitt as the lead of this, and by the end of it, she was in tears. And it's sort of how I felt, and it's sort of how I felt an audience might feel. And then the seed was sort of planted, and I went about building on this idea of what would you do, or what would Irish Mike do if it's the day of a prize fight after a checkered past, fresh out of prison, rather than being just a day of a prize fight. What if this was your final day? What would you do? Who would you speak to? What would you say? And it sort of spawned from there. It grew from there, and a lot of personal experiences. I always had Michael Pitt in mind as Irish Mike. There was nobody else. I could hear his voice in my head as I was writing every word. And rather organically, the other actors who came on board, specifically first and foremost Joe Pesci, and we grew from there. And I was blessed with probably the most magical cast in the history of film. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, and the cast is fantastic. It was something very interesting that I forget if it was you or Michael Pitt who brought it up at the Q&A after the screening the other day,
Right.
that Michael had been very insistent that you should play the priest character, which eventually was played by John McCarrow.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what held you back from also taking on a role in the film?
I find acting rather all encompassing. It's so funny. I can't quite remove myself from something when I'm performing. I find it very hard also to watch myself, and I get very wrapped up in that. And I think I owed it to everybody, cast and crew, to be completely available. And when as much as I love Mike for saying that, and I understand why he initially thought that, but even if it was one day of work or 2 days of work or 20 minutes of work, I would be thinking about just that. And I really believed that there was a better choice for the character too. And John, who I had the wonderful pleasure of working with many years ago on a David Chase film called Not Fade Away, and we were such good friends that I went to him straight off the bat. And I remember saying to Michael, as he kept sort of trying to persuade me, I said, just wait, you're going to be very happy. You're going to be very happy. I think I think directors sometimes get in the way of their actors. I wanted to let the actors run with this. I wanted them to own these parts and sort of build upon it. The collaboration is one of the most exciting parts of this. So I felt very confident that once I'd given the part to the right actors, that they would, the parts themselves would take on a life of their own, which I think happened over and over. Thank God. Thank God.
Absolutely. All the performances are so vibrant. They really leap right off the screen. I'm curious, this is your first film as the director. Was it everything you expected?
Um, I mean, it's been a fight, man.
Yeah.
It's been a fight. We call it fight of the day, not day of the fight, because
Mm.
every day was a fight and continues to be a fight. Our film comes out in just over 2 weeks, and I'm still fighting every single day for every piece of this movie. It's probably added 20 years to my life, but I always believe if you do something, you must do something you love and do it with love.
Mm.
And if I didn't love this film so much, I wouldn't have made it through. And thank God for all the amazing support we've had, and people willing to take that risk, even if we got multiple no's and the door slammed in our face pretty much at every turn. We did persevere, and I wouldn't sacrifice the integrity of the picture. I wouldn't change it from being black and white. I wouldn't change it from being period. I would never change it from being Michael Pitt as Irish Mike. And I think it's those, you know, not willing to make any sacrifice to sort of preserve the integrity of a film like this is what a film like this is really all about. It's about friendship, it's about love, it's about second chance, it's about redemption, it's about the underdog. And this film is the underdog right now.
Yeah.
My God, do we need people's help? Otherwise, these films don't exist. We need people to come out, we need people to show up and have this experience, because the film is an experience. It's about feeling something. We wanted people to come in and actually have one of those great experiences in the cinema, which is a shared experience with an audience, of strangers, but, we're all going through that same journey with Irish.
Absolutely. I did want to talk about there's so many fascinating things about the making of this film,
Yeah.
but I wanted to talk specifically about one artistic choice you made, which was that this film is mostly shot in black and white,
Mm.
except for Mike's flashbacks and
Flits of
memories,
color,
which
yeah.
are, yeah, extremely washed out color. You may not
Mm.
even notice it at first,
Yeah.
which is a really interesting effect because the flashbacks somehow feel simultaneously more real than what we're seeing, but also further away from the world of the everyday.
Yeah.
So was curious to know at what point you decided on this artistic choice and why.
I wrote on the script before anybody wrote it, I wrote a director's statement. I thought it's very interesting reading a script, but knowing how I was going to shoot it, knowing how the camera was going to move, knowing that the black and white sort of symbolized that sort of purgatory, that his life is black and white. He's trying to paint colors to his memories, not all of which are true, but like any memory, they come to us. There's no beginning or end to a memory. They come at moments, and something can bring up a recollection, a memory, anything can. So he's trying to paint this color to his past as he's walking through his present in black and white, leading to the projections for the future at the end of the movie, which are full color, which I wanted to have that because that's what his future is. It's a projection. It's not meant to be tantamount to truth. It's what he hopes for the future. And, that's sort of in essence a bit of the metaphor for the movie is purgatory and his life being black and white. And also all the movies past that I've loved, those sort of character pieces, those human stories, those adult stories that have really shaped me as a filmmaker. I felt that this sort of paid a certain amount of homage to those movies. And sometimes it just feels right, Sometimes it just artistically, you just know something's right. And when you watch the movie, you can't really imagine it being anything but black and white for that grit, that grain, that period, what it is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It also gives the film a kind of timeless quality to it, even though you do specifically place it in, I think,
Absolute.
1989.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Was was there a specific reason that you decided to set it in 1989 as opposed to not setting it at any particular time or
I mean, I think I wanted to take it away from anything technological and
Mm,
like a time which was a bit more simple, which means that you would ride the subway and think and sit there. You know, you wouldn't be on your phone every 5 seconds. I wanted the human interactions to be exactly that, human interactions, that it's paying homage to the past, but it should feel very current in essence, that it is a very commercial film because it's a very relatable film. I think there's something for everybody. Everybody has had somebody, be it a father, a mentor, a best friend, a random stranger, an ex-lover, a daughter, a son. There is an aspect for each person in this movie that I wanted to make something that felt timeless but relatable at the same time and present at the same time, because human spirits don't change. We are who we are. Human interaction we will always love, we will always hate, we will always have anger, we will have bouts of jealousy, of laughter, of hysteria, of whatever that is. But those basic human emotions are so present here, and I want that to be. I want people to go to the cinema. I want people to go to the movies and experience those human stories and those human interactions, and say, well, they're right outside. You can go have one right now if you want. Go do it.
yeah, absolutely. I know we're coming up on the end of our time together, but I had to ask, you come from a bit of a lineage of cinematic artists, and I'm curious if you ever got any advice from them or from any other of the great artists that you've worked with that particularly helped you while making this film.
It's so funny. It's like it constantly,
Mm,
constantly. I've had so much
yeah,
advice. It's almost hard to put them into the amount
yeah.
into words. As much from my family as I have from the wonderful people I've got the privilege of working alongside or with over the years. I think there's been a constant theme that's come up over and over again, which I realized was always be a student of film and always love what you do. I think you've got to love something to dedicate yourself to it. I think it's got to come from a place of love, and I think this entire process has come from exactly that for each one of us. My family's been integral in my sort of. I've never felt like there was a shadow looming over rather than an amazing guiding light. And I've
Mm,
always looked at them as my teachers, as my supporters, as we live. I live in a place that's sort of moving forward with love and grace rather than sort of like trying to pull anything down or anybody down.
mm.
I like the second chance. I like the underdog, and every single one of us can relate to that. So, hence why we made a movie like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see that sense of lineage and what he wants to pass on to his daughter as well
Yeah,
in this movie, and it's
yeah.
really beautiful. Thank you, Jack, again for
Thanks,
spending time
man.
with
It's
us
so good to
today.
see
And
you again, by the way, from the screening
yes.
when we were walking out together, you and your brother. That was so cool. Oh,
Wonderful.
man.
And thank you so much for the film. It's really beautiful.
Thank you, brother. What a pleasure, man. Nice speaking.